Coming up next on Giants Chronicles podcast, we are talking draft and the Giants offseason so far with a special guest. Coming up next. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Giants Chronicles podcast. I'm your host, Gabe, and today we are 1 day closer to the NFL draft. We are 8 days away as we're recording this, and we will be 7 days away when you are watching this, and it is getting real. We are hearing all the rumors. We're hearing more things about prospects. Stuff is coming out. We're getting a better idea what the Giants may do. We have the top 30 visit list from the Giants. So obviously more stuff is coming out. And today we're going to just be talking about what the Giants are going to do, how the offseason affected what the Giants are going to do, and all that stuff like that. And today I have a special guest with me. Big Blue in the Bronx is here. What's up, man?
What is going on, Gabe? I'm really hyped, obviously, heading into next week with the draft. And what really got me hyped, and this is a funny story that's obviously relatable to today, is I was going through my trash on my my Apple computer, and I was, clearing out my drive. And I saw the hype video that I made for the playoffs, and it just reimbursed the hype that, Giants football is obviously still far away, but also, the draft is next week, and we still could improve this team. It's just very exciting, prospects exciting, and can't wait to talk about it, man.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously the Giants, Shane and Dable, they've emphasized like we're going to supplement through free agency in the offseason, and then we're going to really build in the draft. So obviously the draft is a big thing for Shane and Dable, and I think is going to be a big factor in deciding the future. Not that the future is in jeopardy, but how long the Shane and Dable tenure is going to last. I actually heard a report this week that Shane and Dable kind of, when they got in there, before it was like everyone had power in that building, like everyone from John Mara, and it was kind of a wreck, and we all saw it. It was kind of a wreck. And I saw a report this week that Shane and Dable came in there, and it's like they're making all the decisions now. There's no opinion from Chris Mara or whatever, Not that I have nothing against the Mara organization. Have they made a lot of mistakes? Yes. However, everyone makes mistakes. It's just their mistakes are a little bigger than what everyone else's is. But I saw a report this week that Shane and Dable kind of, they don't really take opinions. They kind of take the information and then they form their own opinion, which I think is interesting because, obviously that means that the decisions they make are going to be under a microscope, because if they make a decision someone else doesn't agree with, then that's going to go, back and forth. But obviously, let's start with the big thing coming out of OTA. Saquon Barkley, Dexter Lawrence didn't show up. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think it's going to mean anything in the long term?
I don't really have any negative thoughts about it. I mean, it's a contract situation. You see all sorts of guys, and I really don't like it to compare to the rest of the NFL, but you saw Evan Ingram and Quinnen Williams not show up. I think these are two guys that, obviously they have their contract situation, but I think they're good with Dable. I think they're good with this general team. And one of the things you saw is Dexter was one of the guys who congratulated Daniel Jones on his new contract. Saquon Barkley was out with the offense in Arizona. So right now, I mean, again, it is also voluntary. So even if they did or didn't have a contract situation, they could still not show up. And, obviously it would still be a headline. But at the end of the day, I mean, we'll see what comes out with these contract extensions. It's probably going to be a little bit more, I would say, tension-wise. Maybe for Saquon, maybe not for Dexter Lawrence. I don't know, because you have, I think, it was Jonathan Allen or Deron Payne, one of the defensive linemen for Washington. They got signed to a big extension. Jeffrey Simmons. So that might affect the Dexter Lawrence contract on a long-term basis. But then the running back market, I was talking to a couple of my guys about it, is not very high. I mean, obviously you got those like Dalvin Cook at $14 million, but Miles Sanders, he was signed for, I think, close to 10 or maybe a little less than that. It's a little surprising. And then Saquon Barkley, obviously the $10 million franchise tag. And then there was reports that the Giants pulled that deal off the table. So to be honest, I don't know where those talks are, obviously, with Dexter Lawrence and Saquon Barkley, but I don't think it's going to be a bad thing in the long run. And I think it's going to be telling with draft time coming around, not necessarily for Dexter Lawrence, but for Saquon Barkley, is there's a couple of nice running backs in this draft. I think within the first 4 rounds, maybe even 5, if the Giants take a running back, that might be telling, depending on the running back, depending on the type. Chris Rodriguez probably is a guy who's just, a Brandon Jacobs type. But if they get a Tajay Spears, that might be the end of Saquon in New York. But once again, we'll see, obviously, throughout the next couple of weeks.
No, for sure. And I think, kind of something that's come out of this is that the Giants have a case of the case of me, something like that. I think Mike Lombardi said that. And while that's not exactly how I would have worded it if I was him. Everyone wants to get paid in the NFL. That's just the facts. But a lot of the teammates, and he related to Daniel Jones signing the massive contract. Most of the team was happy when he signed that contract. Most of the team. Now, if you're not, I don't know what you're doing there because, he's your quarterback, he's your captain. That's kind of how it works. And so the idea that relates to Daniel Jones, I don't think that's very fair in my opinion. But I think what he was kind of trying to say what he was kind of trying to get across, and Jordan Brown had brought up this point in his podcast, the ESPN reporter for the Giants, is that I think what he was trying to say is kind of as the season went on, you saw the Giants, they got they got more, hype on themselves. They got more excited on themselves. They thought more of them because they started winning. And so I think maybe that's what Mike Lombardi was trying to say. But what were your thoughts when you saw the whole Mike Lombardi thing? And obviously it was a big news breaking kind of thing.
Of course, it streamed across Twitter the last week. And I don't know specifically what he said, but I know it had something to do along the lines of the Daniel Jones contract. Now, I'm a guy that's, there's 2 sides of the fan base, and there's always that middle part, the pro Jones, the anti Jones, and then there's the middle that, to see both sides of it. And that's kind of where I am, because I'm going to be honest. In the beginning of the offseason, I was not for giving Daniel Jones $40-45 million like the, reports are coming out. And then obviously he gets $40 million. And then I looked at the structure. I said, okay, this is, a good structure, whatever. Am I happy with the $40 million per year? No, obviously. But if it works out, he could be like, some of the guys are getting paid at that level. Derek Carr obviously once was when he was with the Raiders, Dak Prescott, Matt Stafford. So if you put weapons around him, whatever. But also as well, Daniel Jones has had a target on his back ever since he came into this league. Obviously, the number 6 overall pick and all these sort of different things. Yeah. I don't really take too much stock into someone. I'm pretty sure Lombardi was a former failed GM himself. So to be completely fair, I don't know where he's getting this sense of credibility from. But Daniel Jones, besides his contract talks, and you know what? At the end of the day, he had leverage to a certain point because he did get to this team to the playoffs. Like, that's what everybody was waiting for. Okay, Daniel Jones can return if he gets this team to the playoffs. And that's what happened. They won their first playoff game, whether you want to talk about the bad defense of the Vikings, this, that, and the other thing. They won the first playoff game. Now, obviously, they fell to the Eagles. That's a whole different story. But at the end of the day, I don't really buy into this me stuff. Maybe we go into training camp, some thoughts change, but I don't think my thoughts are changing. I think bringing back a lot of this core is really nice. I like the continuity aspect, and that's the first time I could use continuity positively within the last few years. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and with now let's get into Saquon. Kind of just covered Daniel there. Then you have Saquon, and I think that's we'll go on to Dexter after this as well. But Dexter's kind of a completely different situation, in my opinion. Saquon. And I said this a lot on my podcast, and I said, I've talked to other people about it, and they kind of agree to a certain extent. You kind of look at Saquon, and the Giants took a lot of time to negotiate with Saquon. I mean, they took the first 2 weeks after the offseason. People don't really highlight this, but they took the first 2 weeks after the offseason to negotiate him because they didn't start negotiating with Daniel until the combine, around the combine time. And so they took the first 2 weeks and they gave him up to, I think the latest number I heard was it was up to $13 million per year. Now, I guess the question is how much of that was real, what they call real money and fake money. So how much of that was guaranteed money? How much of that was incentives, stuff like that? We don't know. But in my opinion, his agent misjudged the market because you have Saquon, who's only been healthy 2 out of the 5 seasons, fully healthy. I mean, you can say he was healthy his sophomore year in the NFL too, second year, but he was injured. So he was injured some of the season. So technically he was still injured. But I think honestly, I think the best thing for the Giants is just to play him on the tag at this point. I don't know what you think. What do you think about the Saquon situation?
Yeah, I thought you brought up some good points. And also to reference, they threw a deal at him, I think, during the bye week, and obviously he didn't take it. So it's been a long journey to this point. And
Yep.
you have, once again, bring up a couple of good points. Like Saquon has only been healthy for a portion. And um, my original thoughts in terms of like what I would do if I was Joe Shane, I'd give him $14 million max, maybe 15. I would not give him 16 because I think that's what he was trying to do. I know obviously it's verbatim what players say. He kind of said at the beginning of the offseason he wasn't trying to reset the market. Right now, it kind of looks like he is a little bit. But once again, the agent misjudged the market because Miles Sanders didn't get paid a ton. And you still got some of the premium running backs in this league like Chubb, Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott at one point. They were getting paid between $12 to $14 million. And, you know, the problem for Saquon is not just the injuries, it's the fact that running back is easily replaceable. I mean, yeah, he is a generational talent when on the field. And I think also Giant fans, in my opinion, overrate him just a tad because, yeah, obviously in week 1, he carried the Giants. In week 4, he carried the Giants also with Daniel Jones' rushing abilities. But at the same time, there is a little, I would say, gap in his production because you did notice the Lions game, the Cowboys game on Thanksgiving. You know, those were games where Saquon was completely off. Now, whether you want to talk about was the offensive line, this, that, and the other thing, whatever, I think he was missing some gaps. I don't think he was hitting the whole injury, whatever the hell was going on. But obviously, that's not prudent for Giants offense overall. So there's a lot of things that combine into that. You know, we'll see what happens with these talks and all, but to be honest with you, I wouldn't give him more than $14 million, and that's still a lot. And also the years is something to call into question as well, because Saquon, I think, is 26, 27 right now.
26,
what's his production going to be at 28, 29, maybe even 30 if we ever get to that point? So just some things to call into question. And once again, that position, to be honest, it's easily replaceable.
Yeah, that's where it puts him in a where the franchise tag kind of puts him in a bad situation because you just said, you know, he's 26. You know, he'll be 27 after this year if he plays on the tag. And then how many more years do you really want to commit to him is the question. Because then you're in a situation where it's like, do I want then it's going to really get into fake money because you honestly, you just can't commit money. You saw what happened in Dallas when they committed all that money to Zeke. Now Christian McCaffrey's worked out, but even Christian McCaffrey's had his bumps along the way with injuries and stuff like that. Obviously going to San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan kind of regenerated his, you know, name in the league, in my opinion. But what you did bring up was a very good point about his production kind of slowing down towards the end of the year. And that's been a problem throughout his career, actually. It's kind of, I know Justin Pennick of Talking Giants, he tweeted something about it. I don't have the exact numbers ahead of me, but Saquon has always kind of come in with a boom in the first half of the season and kind of gets most of his numbers there. And in the second half, it's like his production just dips completely. And whether that's he's banged up or whatever else it is, which usually it's because he's banged up, you know, I don't know why. Like, I think that's where it comes into question for Shane of how much he should pay him. But, you know, I think you had a 14 million. That's rich. I think that's where he wants, though. I think it's the 14 million because that's like an Alvin Kamara type deal. And I think that's where he wants because that's technically not resetting the market. But at the same time, it is a lot of money to commit to a running back. But we'll see. We'll see what Shane does. To be honest, I think this is just standard operation for any franchise tag player. And if he really wasn't going to play this year, he wouldn't have worked out with the team in Arizona. That's kind of where I stand on that. But moving on to Dexter Lawrence, I think this is a completely different because Dexter Lawrence can be there like right now. Like Saquon technically can't be there until he signs the tender or the franchise tag, or but Dexter can be there. He's on his 5th-year option. And I think ultimately what's going to end up happening here with him is I think they're gonna pay him. I think you just have to. You have Deron Payne, like you said in the beginning of the show, getting paid in Washington. You have Jeffrey Simmons in Tennessee getting paid. And the interesting thing about that is Dexter has the same agent as Deron Payne does in Washington, which does matter to a certain extent. But with all that said, the number for Jeffrey Simmons is $23.5 million per year. How high number-wise would you go for a player like Dexter Lawrence?
Yeah, so the whole Dexter Lawrence situation is interesting. Obviously, brought up that he can go if he wants, and he's obviously not going. And personally, I haven't thought about the numbers aspect too much. Like you obviously just threw out the Jeffrey Simmons and Deron Payne contracts. I personally think, in my opinion, well, Dexter Lawrence probably needs to get paid between 21 and maybe 23 and a half if you want to stretch it, just off of first thoughts. And I think you need to get that deal done very soon, or else you're going to have somebody on the other side of the MetLife Stadium. His name is Quinnen Williams, probably getting paid more, and then you'd have to bump him up in terms of contract numbers and all that sort of stuff. And it's going to be interesting. The Giants have a lot of cap money next year, but in terms of that, I would get the deal done. I don't know which deal I would get done, honestly, first, but I would like to have Dexter Lawrence here for a while. And the thing is, though, kind of the same with Quinnen a little bit, maybe a little Deron Payne is. Even though it's kind of different in some situations where Dexter Lawrence, he didn't really sprout till this year. Now, he obviously had a solid rookie year. There was that time in the Patrick Graham system where they were actually playing him on the end rather than the interior, and that was bad for him. You didn't get a lot of production out of there. Like 2021, when they were playing him on the end, he had 2.5 sacks. He had 4 in 2020, but obviously 2022, he had 7.5, and then did the Pro Bowl and everything like that. So right now, I would say you might want to prioritize that deal a little bit more than Saquon's. Not that I don't want Saquon back, but, it's a ticking time bomb for Quinnen Williams to get his contract done. And you don't want to you want to set the standard. You don't want somebody else to do it for you. So those are basically my thoughts, but I would focus on the Dexter deal before the Saquon deal, even though, once again, Saquon may be a little unhappy with the franchise tag, but I think it's going to work out in the end.
For sure. And the other thing is with these players, like not going to voluntary. I want to stress that these are voluntary. And everyone tells me, oh, but you were freaking out about Kadarius Toney. Well, that's a bit different because last year we were in the first year of the Brian Dable, Mike Kafka, etc. That was the first season. They were installing plays. That was really important. You were there. But Saquon and Dex, they have the playbooks now. They know what they're doing. They know the offense, they know all that, and Dex knows the defense. The coordinators are still here, so it's still the same playbook and stuff like that. And even in OTAs, like Dexter, like a defensive tackle and a running back, they don't even, to be completely honest, don't do that much in OTAs. I mean, you can't hit in OTAs. You don't do hitting in OTAs. It's more of, maybe the running back, runs a route or runs a play or something like that and runs it through the hole. But like, there's no hitting or anything like that. And a defensive lineman, most of their job is hitting the offensive lineman to get through the hole or, stuff like that. So I'm not really concerned with it, kind of like you said. But kind of what you said at the same way is, the Giants kind of already let other people set the market for them. I mean, they already messed that up. I wouldn't say they messed it up, but they already let that happen. They just don't want to do it more at this point is kind of the problem. So I definitely think at the end Dexter will get banged. I think he'll get banged and the defense tackle market's only going up from here. But transitioning more into the draft as it is, we are just around a week away from the draft, which is crazy. I feel like it was just starting draft month. What do you think the offseason, the free agencies, the trade for Darren Waller, signing Daniel Jones, stuff like that, has set up for the draft? What do you think that had an effect on the draft?
Yeah, so to be completely fair, my main target in free agency was one guy, and that was Tremaine Edmonds. Because
Yeah.
I was sick and tired of this run defense just being completely mauled over. You know, we saw what Jalen Smith and all these different guys look like. It's not just last year, but over the past few years as well. And we kind of wanted to get that Mike linebacker in. You know, the Okereke signing, it's not bad. I don't think it's going to be all-star power. I think at some point we'll need to draft a linebacker, but it definitely takes us out of linebacker in the first 2 rounds. And if we didn't get a linebacker in free agency, my top option was Jack Campbell. I love Jack Campbell. I think he does a lot of things really well, the linebacker out of Iowa. So you have that. They did add some weapons. Obviously, as you mentioned, Darren Waller from the Las Vegas Raiders. He really makes a difference. Now, obviously, is it an all-star difference? Not necessarily, but he is another guy that opposing defenses will focus on rather than, Darius Slayton. And Saquon, obviously, that's a load off Saquon's back because guess what? It was all just him before. And obviously, they signed Jeff Smith. They signed Paris Campbell to a prove-it deal. So I still think they could go wide receiver in the first round. If you asked me what I would go in the first round, honestly, and I've been banging on the table for wide receiver the last few years. To me, it's between corner, wide receiver, and my number one is actually center. I know a lot of people kind of despise that idea. You know, they always say, okay, Creed Humphrey was drafted in the second round. This guy was drafted in this round, whatever. I think throw that under the table in terms of positional value because Travis Frederick, that center for the Cowboys, he was drafted in the first round. There's a couple of the names that kind of fall under the radar. But JMS is my first option. I'm going to be completely honest. Weipler, he's all right. If the Giants didn't select JMS the first, I'd probably be okay with him in the second. But you need to solidify that line. I know, obviously, last few years we've been talking about that. But the Giants really don't have any, potential on the interior as of yet. Josh Azudu's coming back from a neck injury. I mean, Ben Bredesen is obviously snapping to Daniel Jones and company. Same thing with Jack Anderson, but are those guys really going to solidify the interior of your line, especially the center position where we haven't had, somebody there? And listen, I was a guy who loved Nick Gates. I actually met the guy at FanFest last year, but he's gone now, and you need something in the middle of that line, an anchor, a solid pass protector, someone who can do it all and who could really be solid. And I don't want to wait till the later rounds to do that. Now, obviously, I mentioned corner, Davon Witherspoon. He's probably not going to fall to 25. Joey Porter Jr. is on my list. I have to take a look at the other corners as well. But I feel like the Giants need one. I mean, Cordell Fly, he looked really good towards the end of last year, especially on the outside. Dory Jackson, we never know because it's always the injury thing with him. Even though last year, it kind of wasn't his fault. I kind of blame Brian Dable for putting him as the punt returner. But obviously, situations happen. The Giants' depth at terms of corner, it's not all that great. But between that and wide receiver would be number 2. Wide receiver, probably Jordan Addison is one of them. Zay Flowers is probably my favorite. I know everybody's talking about Jackson Smith and Jigba and a couple other guys too. But for me right now, if I was to put his priority for the first round, I would say center. And then probably tied for second is corner and wide receiver.
No, for sure. I definitely agree with that. I think that's the consensus around the whole Giants fan base as well. Like you said, cornerback, there's not much of a future at the position right now on our roster. You got Dory Jackson. This is his last year on his contract. Do you really re-sign him? I mean, you would like to have seen more durability in the past couple of years. Now, he could go out and play a full 17-game season this year. I'm not saying that's out of the realm, but then you're kind of assuming he's going to want back, right? So it's kind of 50-50. But I do think if all the wide receivers are off the board, which I don't think is going to happen, I think Zay Flowers, like you mentioned, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, those rumors Quentin Johnson might fall. And that the NFL didn't even invite him to the draft because they didn't want awkward TV moment. Even though they had awkward TV moments last year with like 6 of the prospects they invited. But anyways, that's kind of off topic. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. What the beat reporters are kind of saying at the moment is that their favorite wide receiver is Jordan Addison. That's who they are zeroed in on. That's who they like. And I wouldn't mind that. Jordan Addison, he's an explosive wide receiver. I definitely think he could fit into the Dable scheme very well. So what are your thoughts on Jordan Addison specifically, and what do you think he could bring to the Giants offense?
Well, I think he's definitely a burner. And what we've been talking about these last few years, and to be completely fair, I'm not a huge person when it comes to like scouting wide receivers. That's something I particularly don't know. But from what I've seen from Jordan Addison, separation on the outside, and I think what Joe Shane it was, yeah, he talked about it at the combine. Is he
Yep.
said we like guys who can separate, and obviously they brought in some decent guys this offseason to kind of take care of that a little bit. Paris Campbell can do it from the slot and the outside as well. Slayton
Yep.
can do it, but I think Jordan Addison could do it potentially better than those guys. Speed, obviously, everyone talks about size and the lack thereof for certain guys in the draft. Also, for another guy to throw out the name, might be a first, could be a second. Tank Dell from Houston.
Yes.
Also, he's a solid special teamer, but good hands from Jordan Addison. Size, I'm starting to care less about that. And
Yep.
just for me, when it comes to scouting wide receivers, is separation. I don't care about whether they can run block or not. I don't care about this, that, and the other thing, these little intangibles. Give me a wide receiver that can separate and really take the top off of a defense.
No, for sure. I completely agree with that. And I think that's kind of what I've seen with Dable's offense. And we've only been in it for a year now. However, what I've seen kind of so far with it is that it's not really, you play X, you play slot kind of. It's more of they're putting the best wide receivers. And like you said, what Shane said, the combine, who can separate, who has speed, who can get open, who can bring a little physicality to the game as well. And I think Jordan Addison fits that bill. I mean, everyone always, of course, goes into the, oh, well, we have so many slot receivers. Well, let's be realistic here. Is Jeff Smith, Jamison Crowder, and even, I hate to say this, but Shep, and this is just based on what their contracts are, because none of their contracts, I believe, have guaranteed money on them. Are they really all going to make the roster? I don't think so. I don't think all three of those guys. I mean, maybe. I don't know how deep the Giants want their wide receiver room to be this year, but I just don't think, I don't see all three of them making it. I don't think the Giants are going to prohibit them from drafting, like you said, a Tank Dell, a Jordan Addison, because they have so many slot receivers as it is. But moving on to cornerback, obviously you have the top of the tier, the Joey Porters of the world, the Christian Gonzaga, and then you kind of get to the second tier, and you've got Emmanuel Forbes, you've got Deonte Banks, which is kind of the more of the range the Giants will be drafting in. So what have you seen with those cornerbacks in Deonte Banks and Emmanuel Forbes so far?
So I haven't done much work on Forbes. I've read some scouting reports. The two that I zone in on, at least the last few weeks, is Deonte Banks and Joey Porter. And Porter was the first guy I looked at. Obviously, I think he fits the Giants man-to-man.
For sure.
His comp, according to Draft Network, is Marlon Humphrey. Now, I don't think he'll be that. My problem with him is, occasional grabbing and also the lack of ball production. And I think the Giants have that problem. I think they were last year in interceptions. Adoree Jackson's not a guy that's going to get, a crazy amount of interceptions. Now, obviously, if your defense is really good, you can kind of push that off to the side. But I like Joey Porter as a fit for the New York Giants. As far as Deonte Banks goes, I think he is more of a fit for like zone defenses, but he can also offer versatility. Like, for instance, if Adoree Jackson goes out, Deonte Banks comes in. And even if Banks, is drafted at 25, he's probably the corner number 2. So if he has to shift over to corner 1, the Giants can maybe float a little bit of a zone defense. And but to be fair, going back to a little bit of the man stuff, good physical press corner. He's got good size and length. And kind of like Joey Porter, lack of production in the passing game in terms of interceptions. And also, he's got some injury concerns. So
Yeah.
I personally like Banks. I like Porter. I wouldn't mind them at 25. Obviously, I've mentioned my top priority being center, but I'd probably go with Porter over Banks as of right now in terms of fits for the New York Giants.
Yeah, I think the crazy thing about this year, kind of this goes with Porter as well, is we don't know how the board's going to fall. I mean, you're saying at 25, it was a lot more predictable in the past to kind of predict how the board was going to fall before us. Now it's kind of, we don't really know. Obviously, I think there's a chance Porter falls to 25. I just know a lot. I think Pittsburgh likes him a lot. Pittsburgh is known for drafting Penn State players as well, just because they're close and they always, send a big front office to their pro day, stuff like that. I think Pittsburgh's interested. Minnesota needs a corner. They're before us. So I think there's actually a lot of teams that need corner. I like Porter. I'm a Penn State fan, so I like Porter. I expressed the same concerns as you do, though. You was very grabby at Penn State. And the interesting thing is Manny Diaz runs a very comparable defense to Wink Martindale. It's all about the blitz, and then it's all about the press man, and you leave your corners on an island, which is kind of why I think it's a good scheme fit. But then you have the grabbiness and stuff like that. I think that it can be somewhat teachable to a certain extent, not fully teachable. But moving on to a position that I think is, possible at 25, like you said as well, in the center position. You've got obviously the top tier guys in John Michael Schmitz and the Wisconsin center. If his name is slipping my head right now, maybe you can remind me. Yes, that Joe Tippmann, is it?
Joe Tippmann. And then you got Weipler out of Ohio State. So I've done work on 2 of the 3, and even some guys that are available in later rounds. Jarrett Patterson. I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I know about him. And Olusegun Oluwatimi from Michigan. And I haven't done too much work on Tippmann, but a lot of people are kind of, and I hate to be pre-influenced before watching the film, but a lot of people are saying, he's not as good as Weipler. He's not as good as fit as JMS. I love JMS. I like Weipler. I don't think he does a lot of damage in the running game. I don't think he's over the top there. His pass protecting is really well. But there are times where, in terms of Weipler, he doesn't put his hands, I would say, fast enough into the defender's chest, and that makes him vulnerable a little bit. As far as Patterson goes, just to offer a little mid to late round kind of analysis, I like him, but the problem is I don't think he's a fit for what the Giants want to do, and that's not necessarily specific in terms of like, oh, it's a zone or a man or whatever. I just don't think he has the speed and athletic ability to do the pulling that the Giants want. I think Schmitz offers that. I think Weipler possibly offers that. I think Oluwatimi from Michigan offers that. But I just don't think that Patterson offers that. And I like Oluwatimi as well. So I'd probably, if it was me for the Giants and Fitz, I'd probably say Schmitz, Weipler, and then Oluwatimi, and then falling behind is probably Tippmann and Jared Patterson.
No, for sure. And I definitely agree with, that statement. Obviously my favorite is JMS, like you said as well. And also I could see us even trading up in the second round to get him. Obviously, I think it's a little too rich at 25. I don't think it would be terrible. I wouldn't be mad. However, I think it's a bit of a reach from what I see because he still brings weaknesses to his game, like every prospect does, but he still has some weaknesses. And I think his target, where people are really going to look to draft him is that Jets spot in the second round. Or they have 2 picks in the second round, actually, the Jets do. They need a center bad. And I think they're targeting John Michael Schmitz. And as Jordan Brown said on his podcast this week, that says the Giants could possibly even trade up to get JMS. And obviously they like him. They had him in for a top 30 visit. Bobby Johnson ran drills at his pro day, the O-line coach. So obviously there's interest in him there. But I guess we'll just see what the Giants do at the center position. But that brings me to a position that's kind of under the radar, and that's defensive line. Obviously, the Giants have their core 4, is what you can call it. You've got Ojulari and Thibodeau on the edges, and then you've got Dexter and Leo manning the inside kind of thing. What do you think? Leo's on his last year of his contract. That's the other thing. And, I think Shane really does look at that and plans for the future. And it doesn't look like Shane really has any interest in extending him, which is what I initially thought they might do. So what do you think about possibly, if the board falls a certain way that doesn't favor the Giants taking a wide receiver or a corner, what do you think about taking possibly Brian Brees out of Clemson? You've got Kalijah Cansey out of Pay, who's being compared to Aaron Donald already. What do you think of possibly taking D-line in the first round?
So, I mean, not a lot of players are like Aaron Donald, if any at all. Right. That's obviously because of the Pittsburgh connection with Cansey. I like Cansey. I haven't done much work out of the kid out of Clemson. But to be completely fair, just based on the D-line position, do I think the Giants need depth there eventually in the draft? I would say yes. They did get Rakeem Nunez-Roches, And I feel like they got somebody else. Maybe they slipping my mind on that D line, but they do have Nacho Williams in terms of Leo Williams. As far as he goes, you saw last year, just not a ton of production. And I don't think the Giants are going to even justify that by extending him, whether it's, for lower money in the next few years. So it's kind of an interesting situation with him. And I definitely think they could replace him. Now, if they select Kancey, I'll be good with the player. I won't be good with, I would say, the selection, because, I personally favor 3 other positions before that. But a guy I like personally as a depth guy is Keanu Benton later on out of Wisconsin. There's a couple other D linemen that are slipping my mind that I actually like as well. So as far as just the position overall, I would not take D-line in the first round unless, for some reason our favorite corners, wide receivers, and centers are not available. And obviously it could be a very weird board this year. We'll see what happens. But Kancey's a very solid player. I just don't like him at 25.
No, and I agree with you. It's something that I've seen in the past couple of weeks. That's been brought up. Obviously, the Giants are going to address D-line somewhere. Shane has emphasized that. I kind of agree with you, and where you see, addressing it in the later rounds. Someone I like out of Texas, Moro Ojumo. He's out of Texas. He's a good defensive depth line. I like DJ Dale out of Alabama. As a depth defensive line piece. I'm trying to see if Brian Young out of Alabama as well. So there's a lot of potential depth D-line pieces that, like you said, you could get in the later rounds that I would be much rather than picking Kancey at 25. But what is your favorite late round or mid round prospect in this draft? Just to hear your thoughts on that, or mid round wide receiver, whatever.
So I do like Tank Dell. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah,
I'm just looking at some of the guys I have on my list, and there's 2 other guys, and I forgot about their names because it's been a little bit since I've done some research and done some film on some prospects. Cody Mock out of North Dakota State.
yes,
He is awesome. He is an awesome mauler. I know obviously there's the small school thing that kind of pushes him to the 2nd, 3rd, maybe even 4th round. I would absolutely take him. He can play tackle. He could play guard. I really like the mentality he brings. And another guy I really like as well is a kid out of Pittsburgh, and it's not Kalijah Kancey. It's Habakkuk Baldonado. I think he plays very good against the run. I think he could work on his pass rush skills a little bit more. But at that point, it's going to be 5th, 6th round. So you're not going to care too much. And I think the Giants actually need an edge at some point. Azeez Ojulari is becoming a little bit injury prone. I mean, his first year, he was fine. Played all 17 games, did what he had to do. And then this year, mostly it was just Kayvon Thibodeau and then whoever else lined up on the other side. You really can't have that this year. So Baldonado, actually, I wouldn't mind if the Giants decided to pick him up. I know also as well, I think he's more of a D-line than an edge. I was actually, before I came on here, looking at the top 30 visits, and the kid from Louisville, Yaya Diaby, was one of the guys who visited the New York Giants. I wouldn't mind him as well. So Baldonado is one guy, as I mentioned, Cody Mock, and Yaya Diaby also as well.
Yeah, for sure. And Cody Mock, kind of watching his film, watching him at the Senior Bowl, watching him in his pro day as well, he reminds me of Josh Ezeudu in a way, because when we drafted Josh Ezeudu, the main thing you heard is the flexibility. Yeah, he can play tackle, he can play center, he can play guard, he can play all over the O-line. And Cody Mock brings the similar traits as well. He like you said, he's very versatile. And he shined when I was at the Senior Bowl. He was pretty impressive there. And obviously, the other guy I've been doing some research on, Yaya, is it Itabadi, the kid out of Louisville?
Yeah, I think something like that.
Yeah, so out of Louisville, he is someone I could see us targeting. Even I have him sliding to even the late 4th round, where we are.
There's another prospect. Thank you for reminding me, because and this has nothing to do with the Senior Bowl, but I was trying to jog my memory a little bit. I'm like, there's a couple of guys that are not in my head right now. I mentioned Jose Ramirez out of Eastern Michigan. He really impressed at the East-West Shrine Bowl, and he's another small school guy. I think he had 10 sacks this year or something for Eastern Michigan. But he's another guy to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, that's an underrated need for the Giants is the edge rusher position. I'm actually glad you brought that up because I mean, yeah, like you said, Ojolari just has proven he's not been able, he's only 2 years into his career. So I think of course, you give him another, year or so to see if he can stay healthy this year. But yet he hasn't proven he can stay healthy. And, Jihad Ward just isn't a third edge rusher in this league. He's a great personality. He's a great locker room guy. And that's all great. But when you look at his play, he's a good run stopper. He's a terrible pass rusher. He's not a great pass rusher, and you really need that third pass rusher in the NFL. But moving to wide receiver, going back to wide receiver a little, let's say the board doesn't fall where the Giants can go wide receiver in the first 2 rounds. Tank Dell's off the board in the second. What do you think about a guy like Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma? He's on the top 30 visit list, and he's someone I kind of liked out of Oklahoma, and also Tyler Scott out of Cincinnati. What do you think about those guys, and what have you done anything any research wise on them?
So I'm gonna just reference myself to Marvin Mims right now, and I've watched a little bit of film on him. I like what I see, though. I like what I see. It would be tough if Tank Dell's off the board. I know a lot of people are also craving for the kid out of Princeton, Aceves. I think that's
Andre Lashivas, yeah, that.
Aceves. I
Yep.
don't think he'd be I think he's a bigger body guy, so I don't know that would necessarily go after him. Also, I know a lot of people like Rashee Rice. He does not separate, so he is off my list.
He had a
Uh,
terrible Senior Bowl. Oh my
yeah,
gosh. Horrific. I mean, I went into the Senior Bowl, and he was one of the guys that had the microscope, of course, because he was a guy who could improve his draft stock majorly at the Senior Bowl, pushing him into the first round, actually. But he just completely, and like you said, he showed that he cannot separate to save his life. Because a lot of the Senior Bowl is like one-on-one type of stuff, man coverage. He couldn't separate. He could not do anything. It was terrible. Yeah, he's off my board. I don't want him. I don't want anything to do with him. He was disappointing at the Senior Bowl. I completely agree with that. With the Andre Lachivas note, he's out Princeton, former track star, converted to the football game, the game of football, and he's an interesting guy because he definitely has a lot of work to do still. But the potential's there. He has the speed. He has a big body, which the Giants do need X receivers. They do still need, they have Hodgins, they have Slayton. That's kind of our main X receivers. And they have Colin Johnson coming off the ACL, which if you remember, Colin Johnson was supposed to be kind of something this year. Dable, he got hurt in training camp, but Dable liked him. And that was obvious throughout the training camp process. And apparently, allegedly, OBJ, when I'm not trying to bring up OBJ. I promise this isn't going to OBJ. Oh, when OBJ had his little visit with the Giants, apparently the agent Andre Lachivas is OBJ's agent, and that's kind of where the Giants found out about him, and they've had interest throughout the process in him. But it's a big risk where he's slated to go right now, which is the 4th to 5th round range. But, wrapping this up, kind of, what do you want the Giants to ultimately accomplish in this year's draft? And what feeling do you want to have coming out of the draft?
I want, and this is something we brought up earlier. Well, really, you did. You were talking about how, the influence, the mayors and stuff like that. What people are really kind of sliding under the table is last year was the draft, obviously, first for Joe Shane, Brian Dable, but they really didn't have their front office guys. They had some, but not all. Chris Pettit was fired. Some of these guys were demoted. So now they have at least probably most of their scouts in the building. I want to come out of this knowing that there's more of a solid core. Because, obviously last year you grabbed a couple of different guys, whatever. I want to come out with a center within the first 3 rounds. I really do. Now, if we get Patterson, I'd be okay with it. Wouldn't be enthralled. But I do think center is high on the Giants list. So I want to at least start to solidify that interior whole line. As far as wide receiver goes, I wanted to touch on this earlier and kind of slip my mind. I think what the Giants' purpose of free agency is to avoid last year. Now, not necessarily go top heavy in terms of the wide receiver position, but to kind of solidify the foundation, the depth. That's why they brought Slayton back. That's why they brought Jeff Smith back. That's why they brought Shep back. That's why they brought Paris Campbell back. Now, I think in my personal opinion, in my personal view, their potential plan is to maybe trade for a wide receiver next year that's, very good or something along those lines. And I'm not going to bring up Stephon Diggs or all these other guys because I don't know who's going to be available next year. But I would like to come out with a solid, again, maybe within the first 4 rounds, solid wide receiver on the outside that can separate. As far as corner, I'm a little less worried about that. Maybe I'll put wide receiver over corner in terms of draft priority. But corner still needs to be addressed because we don't know what the future is with the Dory Jackson. I think this is his last year as of right now as a New York Giant, and he fits the system. But then again, do the Giants want him back after all the injury concerns and this, that, and the other thing? So we don't necessarily have a bright future there. And just depth, man, as we talked about with the edge position, we need depth. Jihad Ward, I think he had 3.5 sacks this season. That's going to be the peak. He's not going to get more than that. He's not even going to probably touch 3 this season. And listen, I like the guy. Azeez, I mean, he bulked up, but guess what? He got injured a lot. And we can't have Kayvon Thibodeau survive on an island alone. You need somebody else on the other side. So depth is going to be a big thing. I think the Giants have taken care of that with a wide receiver position, but I would like to see how they go about that with other positions as well. So I would like a running back potentially, because obviously Breida's on a 1 year, and whether they go with Saquon or they don't think Saquon's a future. So I'd probably say come out with a center, come out with a wide receiver, and solid depth all around. That at least we're sure, okay, if A guy gets injured, B guy can step in and at least do half as good as his job.
Yeah, for sure. Agree with all of that. I mean, especially the point about the front office and kind of the war room for the Giants is going to look a lot different this year. In the room when the ESPN or NFL Network goes to the room, just because, like you said, they fire a lot of guys after the draft. They started bringing their own guys, and also they kind of know what Wink and now what Kafka kind of want in their schemes, which is also a really important thing. So yeah, I think the Giants have a better idea of kind of what they're looking for, and they had a full year to evaluate. It's not like we have the Buffalo Bills draft board in our room this year. It's the New York Giants draft board. So definitely happy to see the draft, and Big Blue in the Bronx, I appreciate you for coming on. Thank you for taking time to come on, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, I had a fun time talking. Giants football is always great to talk about. I mean, we're still in the off season. We still got a couple of months till training camp, but the draft just makes us feel that we're closer to Giants football. And obviously there's other sports that I interact with, but there's no feeling like Giants football. And yeah, man, I appreciate me being invited on here. Would love to do it again. And yeah, it was a great time.
For sure. Just before you go, tell people, where they can find you. If they don't already subscribe to you, let them know where they can find you real quick.
Yeah, of course. So I would say about a month ago, we just passed the 1K subscriber mark on our channel. We're doing a lot of different things, a lot of live streams probably within the next 2 weeks. My brother, we're all Knicks fans, but my brother's going to be calling a game for the Knicks every playoff game. We got the NFL draft. We got a full week of draft streams, previews, Giants previews, and then obviously the 3 days, the Thursday through the Saturday. Just a lot of good stuff happening on our channel. And also we offer memberships as well as merch. So also social media, most active on Twitter, Big Blue in the Bronx, B Blue in the Bronx, that is.
Yep, for sure. So thanks for coming on. And yep, like you said, hopefully we can do this again. So thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it. That was Big Blue in the Bronx, guys. A great episode. I appreciate all of you who listened to this episode. If you are new, please subscribe, like, and comment, and share with your friends, guys. We're really growing here. Hoping to get to 100 subscribers by the end of draft month. So just some programming updates. The rest of the week, you guys will be watching this on Thursday. On Friday, I'm going to have hopefully a video out on the top prospects, not just top prospects, but all the prospects I have looked at throughout this draft process in all of the rounds, really. Just to give you guys an idea, I was going to do an each positional breakdown. I decided that first of all, it's a lot of commitment to make each video, and you need to have a lot of information. And I think it would be more informative for me to do a video with just a bunch of the prospects I like in this draft. So we'll have that out on Friday, maybe Monday, Friday or Monday, that will be out. And then next week, we'll obviously have all the rumors here on the Giants Chronicles podcast. Probably a live stream week, probably a lot of live stream content. So please like, share, subscribe. And with that, as always, guys, let's go Big Blue.